You know, I think this video we're going to talk. I want to do something that I've said I was going to do and haven't done yet. And I think we're going to start my Sunday catalog. I don't know how regular or how frequent this is going to be, but we're going to start it and we'll see where we go with it. So I want to start today with my testimony. Why not? That seems like a good enough place to start. Roll the intro and I'll get into it. All right, good morning to you. Well, in this case, good afternoon. Or good morning, depending on where you're at, I suppose. So my testimony, what is the testimony? I am testifying on how God saved me. You know, I've always hated that term, I found Jesus, or I found God. No, you didn't. You didn't find anything. You weren't looking for him. In your natural condition, separated and apart from God, it is not in your nature, therefore it is not within your will to seek after God. Now you may seek after and find other gods, absolutely, but the God that saves, you will not find. You will only find him when he calls you to himself. Because again, it's not in your nature to seek after the living God, the God of the Bible. And so this is my testimony of how God saved me. So I guess I'll set the backdrop with a few sentences about my early life, and that being I was raised in a Roman Catholic home. My mom being the Catholic, my dad was Lutheran, but he wasn't in any way a practicing Lutheran. He was kind of too messed up to really be involved in any kind of a church or anything like that. My mom come from a strong line of Roman Catholics. I don't know how many generations old, at least I know a few. I mean, my great uncle Pete and Charles were both Roman Catholic, and they were the original immigrants from Italy. My grandmother, of course, and then my mom, her brother, my uncle and his wife, and my cousins, they're all Roman Catholic. I, however, am not, though I was supposed to be raised as one. I did go to communion. From 5th to 8th grade, I went to St. Rosa of Lima, very Catholic school. Went to Mass, was even an altar boy. And then throughout the first 3 years of my high school, it was at J.K. Mullen, which was an all-boys, quote-unquote, Christian brothers school, but it was Catholic. You know, we had brothers and nuns and that kind of thing. But I was never confirmed a Catholic. Even before high school, Catholicism was really a huge question mark for me. In fact, I would say Catholicism led me directly into atheism more than it did anything else. The only good thing Catholicism did for me was teach me that there was, at the very least, the possibility of a God. But again, by the time I was in high school, I was more drifted into atheism than I was anything else. And that was largely because, I would guess, the Catholics around me informed me of what Catholicism really was. At least that's how I interpreted it, right? I said I went to a Catholic school. I did. And, you know, that wasn't the first place I experienced being bullied upon. However, it's interesting to know that it was a very diverse school, and all the bullies were Mexicans. And if you're Mexican out there and you're watching that, don't be offended. I'm not being racist. I'm just saying what the truth is. You know, Pat Gomez, John Baca, Conrad Cordova. These are not white people names, okay? So, just saying, I'm not being racist. I don't got nothing against the Mexican culture. I'm just saying that the kids that were the bullies there were Mexicans. And I don't even know why. I didn't grow up with any of them. I don't know who, never knew who any of them were before I went to that school, but whatever. And to show you I'm not racist or tribalist, I hate the word racism, that's really an incorrect term, tribalist. My first crush as a itty bitty boy was a Mexican girl, Geraldine Ferraro. So, you know, just saying. I actually thought I was going to end up being married to a Mexican because there's just that many around us in the neighborhood I grew up. And not all were bad. There was a few bad eggs, but most were good. Mrs. Sanchez down the block, oh, she was a sweetheart. She was like another grandmother to me. Anyways, I digress. I went off on a tangent. I do that a lot. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I do. I don't make apologies for it. It is what it is. You're here for the ride, or you can check out. And I don't mean that meanly. You know, you have freedom. So that's a little bit, and the reason why Catholicism was already sketchy to me was part of the bullying, and part of, because these were good Christian Catholic boys and girls, right? They were actually into it. But I suppose when there's no real penalty for your sin, your wrongdoing, other than a few Hail Marys, Our Fathers, maybe a couple Apostles' Creeds, and a confessionary to a dude that can't possibly absolve you of your sins because it's not him you sinned against, then, you know, you're still free to do whatever you want to do, good or bad. And a lot of these kids chose bad. And I was definitely not easy to get along with at that school. I mean, my class, that Catholic school was happy to see us go. Because it wasn't just me. We were, the class as a whole. If Robert Vine sees this, he was my classmate there and still is a friend of mine. He knows darn well that our class was, we were little demons. We were bad. But I think I'm the only one that did the really, really bad stuff. Yeah, take that for what it's worth. So the adults showed me what Catholicism was all about. At our bazaars and our little Catholic parties, again, people getting drunk Saturday night, Friday night, gambling, you know, swearing, and then pretending to be saints Sunday morning. That, you know, as a young boy, even I could see the hypocrisy in that. Even I could see the absolute, you know, just wrong there. It wasn't a hard thing to see or deduce. You didn't have to be brilliant. You just had to be aware and not be okay with it. And so, you know, Catholicism never really got a hold on me. And I thank God for that. I do. So anyway, my life was super chaotic, super angry, without any kind of direction. And somehow in the midst of that, I was still able to meet a girl, marry her, and have a son. 2 sons to be exact, but at this point, we'll just say 1 son. Now, he was born out of wedlock. His mother, my ex-wife, she was 6 months pregnant with him when we attended her senior prom. Again, I wasn't a good guy. My own mother said of her name is Bonnie, that she was a good girl until she met me. That I was her, the reason for her decline out of good girl status. And there's truth in that. That's not an inaccurate statement by any means. But she wasn't saved either, but she was probably more spiritually minded than I was. Over the course of time, her mother, who was a spiritualist at that point, a white witch is what she liked to call herself, performing witchcraft and seances and spirit summonings and things like that. All the things that God says not to do, she was doing, thinking that she was doing it in the service of God. That's how Satan works. That's how deception works. That's how Satan appears as an angel of light to deceive. He gets you to do the abominable while thinking you're doing good. So this woman finds a flyer to a church on her car one day, and it's to Grace Community Fellowship. God is at this point calling her. He's reaching out to her spirit with his spirit and calling her. And so she goes. And I don't know how long it took, but she kept going and she got saved. God saved her through the preaching of these people. Through that experience, Bonnie, the mother of my children, started going to church with her. And Bonnie would come home, because I was very antagonistic against religion and church. Again, I said I was kind of more, I don't know if I was full throttle atheist, maybe agnostic would be the proper term. I mean, I knew there was something out there, but I didn't see him as benevolent or interactive or caring one way or the other. Anyways, I became very bitter towards her and very argumentative and angry that she was getting together with her mom and going to this church. Because understand, and I'm purposely leaving a ton out for time purposes. Her mom and I are bitter enemies. And to see her, she's still not my wife at this point, my girlfriend and my future mother-in-law make amends and get back together again was a direct affront to me, because I had been to war with this woman so many times that I had a very bitter, hard, and unforgiving heart. And I just was beginning to see Bonnie as a traitor to our family. But I could see that she was happier. She was excited about this church. She was excited about the people. She was making friends. But me and my small-minded, materialistic, antithetical to anything good way of thinking about things, I tried to squash that. I hurled insults at her, insults at people I didn't even know, at the people of that church. And finally I laid it down. I said, if you want to go to church, then we're going to find a church that we both can go to. Because she told me what kind of church it was. It was a charismatic church. And me being raised Catholic, even though I rejected Catholicism, it was a convenient way for me to rebuke the charismatic church. So I still So I fell back on some of the old Catholic doctrines that I remembered, and you know, argued against going to a charismatic church. And but I wasn't doing it righteously, not by any means. I was just using it as a tool, as a weapon in my warfare, so to speak. We go to this church that this little old lady referred us to, and it ends up being like a Catholic church, but I don't think it was a Catholic church. And I say that because even though it had the vestments and the stuff that made it look Catholic, the priest at the time of communion was kissing everybody on the mouth. Men, women, old, young, it didn't matter. I did not receive communion, neither did Bonnie. We got out of there. That was the freakiest, most messed up thing I had seen. I mean, even in my hedonistic, broken state, I could not abide with that. There really wasn't another option. And again, this is God working. So I ended up going to the charismatic church with Bonnie and her mother. And I wasn't happy. It's like I went, but I went there to be the biggest jerk I could be. You know, I was the last one in. I didn't say hi to nobody. I was just angry, clenching my fist the whole time throughout the service. You know, being a charismatic church, they broke out into speaking in tongues, quote unquote, and all this chaos, and I was just like, I hate this. I hate every minute of it. And then I would be the first one out. People would try to shake my hand. I'd slap their hand away. I'd shoulder blocked a few people on the way out the door. I was being the biggest butt I could be, in hopes that they would tell me never come back. Then I could legitimately tell Bonnie that, hey, I tried, you know what, they didn't like me, so yeah, we need to do something different. But you know what, they never did. They took that week after week, month after month. They just took it. And I got to admit to you, that really started wearing on me. Like, how can they just do this? Why would they do this? I am like one of the worst people there that is being purposely obnoxious and rude, and they're not kicking me out. That just befuddled me to no end. Because I just assumed everybody would be just as angry as I was. Because I wouldn't have put up with my behavior if I was the host. So then we start going to this small group led by this couple named Tom and Donna Rabach. They were great people. And one of the women there was one of the women at church that I had actually had the worst, I don't know what it was, the most obstinate connection to. Her name was Laura. She ended up being a really good friend and someone that I looked up to quite a bit for a time. Anyways, at that time, I made it my point to be an enemy of hers. And so when Bonnie dragged me to this small home group, and this small home group, this is like something extracurricular, right? This is a few families, a few people that just get together like on a Friday night, I believe. And we would just discuss, we'd go over the Bible, a couple of passages, discuss it, have some time of just snack eating and maybe some game, and just kind of have this real general sense of fellowship and community with one another in a smaller setting instead of the larger church as a whole. And I grew to really love that, and I miss that a lot. And God, isn't that beautiful? Man. Anyway, and so I remember just staring her down, just looking at her across the room, the living room, staring her down, and she finally, spoke to Tom, and said, I might move to another group. There's another group for single people that's forming up. She goes, I think I'm going to move over there. And I jumped up, and being the noble one, I said, oh no, don't do that. I will leave, because clearly I'm the problem here, and you're here first. There's no reason for you to leave. I'll go ahead and I'll leave. It's not a problem. I don't need to be here anyway. Well, I got up to leave, and Tom's wife, Donna, I'll never forget this moment. It was very heroic. I'm 6'2", and at the time I was weighing about 210, 220. I was roofing full time. And she is like 5'2", maybe 5'3", and she was like 115, 120 pounds. And she jumps up and stands between me and her front door as I'm trying to get out. And she stepped right in front of me, stuck her finger right in my face. Like, I literally think she touched my nose. And she told me, in no uncertain terms, you don't need to get out, you need to get saved. That hit me like a freaking brick. I couldn't believe that anyone had the gall to do that. I literally picked her up by her forearms, moved her out of my way, and stepped outside. And at this point, I'm literally gasping for air. Like, something happened and hit me internally when she did that. And that was one of the wildest moments. I'm still not saved at this point, but God is working through these people and punching holes into my life, apparently. So now we get to it. I learned to not be so antagonistic to these people at church. And one Sunday in particular, I don't know what the sermon was about, I don't know what the preaching was about, but I had to make things right. I can't explain it any other way other than I just fell under a really deep conviction for the way my life had been, for the way I had been, and I just knew that I had a mountain of sin that I was carrying on my back. And I knew I wasn't a good person, but knowing you're not a good person and knowing you've sinned against a holy God, against the creator of this world, everything in it, seen and unseen, including you, that's a whole different feeling of admission. Anyways, I knew that I had sinned against this God, and I knew that I had to make it right, and the only way I could make it right was to confess, repent of that sin, and place my faith in Jesus Christ, His Son. So this church, as many evangelical churches do, have these things called altar calls, where the pastor will call you up out of your place and want you to publicly come forward. Now, they do it in such a way that people aren't staring at you and gawking and taking notes on who the sinners are and who's not. That's not the point of it. The point of it is that if you are really under conviction, if you are really convinced that God has called you to repentance, then there should be some confirmation on your part and obedience on your part to get up out of your chair and boldly make a walk, and then, do what you need to do. And so I did. And when I got down on my knees on that, at this point it's actually staged, not actually an altar. And I wanted to make a confession, and I wanted to make things right. I mean, I didn't know what to say. There's really no really right thing to say. I mean, it's your heart reaching out to God's heart. And you're just You're just trying, you're really wanting to be absolved in the way that God has prescribed. Wow, Canopolis is really low. My goodness. That's so low. And so I knelt down, I closed my eyes, and I'm beginning to get myself into that place mentally. Next thing I know, an agent of hell has entered into the scene. And it's this dude saying, hey, when you get done here, I'll come over to my house and we'll have barbecue. I just got a new grill, really want to try it out to celebrate your new conversion. We're going to go blah, 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 blah. And I got so angry, so mad, so out of my mind mad. I got up off that altar. I hadn't done anything yet. So at this point, I'm still very much unsaved, and I reacted in a very much unsaved manner. I spun around. I went back to, by now, in this conversation, Bonnie is now my wife. Anyway, and my mother-in-law, both who are just sitting there with smiles on their faces, super excited that I am now finally, after almost a year of people praying for me and putting up with my nonsense and shenanigans, I'm finally getting saved. And as soon as they saw my countenance, my face, the fury in my eyes, those smiles wiped away quickly. And I remember literally screaming, everybody heard me. I don't know what you all believe in. I don't know what it is you're doing here. There's nothing up there. There isn't a God. And I'm good. I'm done and I'm leaving. And I stormed out of there. And let me tell you something, man. When I made that confession, it broke my heart, because I knew that wasn't true. I knew screaming, saying there wasn't a God, wasn't a true confession, and it broke my heart. And I was in tears by the time I got out to the vehicle, and I was just, I don't know, I was angry, I was confused, I was feeling guilt because I'd said that, and I was just beside myself. Growing up, dealing with strong emotions in a proper way was not a thing that was taught or caught or displayed within my family. And so, I just went off the rails and said some very stupid things. I did go back. I knew I was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to go up to another altar call, even though, I knew I needed to do something to make things right. Now, this is where good theology and bad theology really plays in. A good theology would have informed me I didn't have to do an altar call. A good theology would have informed me of a lot of things, but in Western evangelicalism, there's not a whole lot of good theology. I'm just going to say that. A whole lot of made-up theology. Maybe with good intentions, but it's still bad theology. Well, there ends up in a not so near future from that point, there's what they call a revival. And I have to say real quick before I do, charismatics are especially filled with a lot of bad theology. As loving as they are, and as good as as that group of charismatics, because you can't broad brush charismatics. They come in various spectrums and colors and flavors. That specific group was very good to me, and I'll forever cherish them in my heart. But they were filled with bad theology. That being said, there was a revival that they were having, where it's like a week-long, preaching from a dude. And again, I have no idea what was being preached on or taught. All I know is I was there every night, diligently. And every night, when it came time for the altar call, I could feel that conviction, once again, burning in my heart, wanting me to go forward, pulling me forward, wanting me to do what I knew at that time, to do was right. And to get right with God, to finally seek the relief that I so desperately needed in my life against the weight and burden of the sin and the guilt and everything, the shame and everything that I carried with me and just gotten used to, like wearing chains around your neck, and you eventually get used to it, and they're there, they're weighing you down, but you just learn to work around it. And that's what a hardened heart does. It learns to work around the shame and the guilt of their sin and just keep functioning. And that hardened heart was being broken open by the preaching of God's word and by God's Spirit calling out to me and calling me to himself. So Monday goes by, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And, each night that conviction is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And I'm gripping the chairs in front of me tighter and tighter and tighter, because not that long ago was that horrible episode where I went up to the altar and I got derailed and I blew up and made a complete jerk of myself. And I was so afraid of that happening again. And, I couldn't have that. But I knew I had to do this. And so this war is inside of me. Go, don't go. It'll happen again. God really doesn't want you. He's not really trying to save you. He's just setting you up for this next slap down. And just so much noise in my mind. So much noise. Can't even think straight as this war is going on inside of me. And Tom Robach remember him from the small home group? Him and his wife are sitting next to me and Bonnie, and I'm sweating. I'm gripping that chair as tight as I can. I'm white knuckled. And Tom leans over, do you want to go forward? And that cut through all the noise. That cut through all the noise in my head, and I said, yes. And I started, and he's like, do you want me to go with you? Because he knew what happened. I mean, everybody knew what happened. And I said, no, I have to do this on my own. This is me and God. This has got to be just me and him. And I didn't know it at the time, but that is actually theologically correct. And so, because evangelicals also have a horrible habit of leading you through what's called a sinner's prayer. Not biblical. I don't support it at all. And so I rejected that. And I said, this has got to be between me and God. And so I went up on my own again. And that's where it happened. Had no emissary from hell come up and try to distract me. I felt like I was in this little bubble, just me and God alone. And I was pouring out my heart to him, crying like a big baby, confessing every sin I thought I could remember from as far back as I could remember, so that meant I was there a while, and just asking to be forgiven, asking to be saved. There isn't a formula, there isn't a vocabulary that you can say. There isn't this is why I reject the sinner's prayer. There isn't a formula. There isn't. There's faith, and there's intent, and there's desire. And God, being the discerner of the heart, knows if you're legit or not. You can be totally illegit and not even know what you're doing, say a sinner's prayer, and somebody says you're saved. You're not. you're not saved. You don't have to be a blubbery crybaby mess like I was, but if your intent and your heart are sincere, God will save you because God has called you to himself. God will never turn away those whom he has called. And even if your prayer isn't perfect, even if your intent isn't always perfect, God will save you. And God saved me that night. And I know he did because of some wonderful little short-term confirmations that in his good grace chose to share with me. Not everybody has that. I literally felt like a physical weight of the burden of guilt come off my back. I literally felt that. And tears of sorrow and regret and pain turned to tears of joy. And I was laughing and crying all at the same time. I remember the next day. Colors were more colorful. It was like, you ever seen the allergy commercials where they show, like greens and blues and it's like the sunshiny day, but you see this haze over it, and then they show you, I think it's like a Visine commercial, and they pull the film off, and then everything is more vibrant and clear. It's kind of that's the best analogy I could come up with. Before I was saved, everything kind of had this dinginess about it. After I was saved, everything was just bright and beautiful and colorful, and I smiled, and life was beautiful, at least for a time. There is a honeymoon period, and then, life kind of goes back in. And the third thing that was super apparent was I was so hooked on the F word. The F word was a constant word in my vocabulary. So much so I was actually rebuked by the military for using it too many times. And the next day after I was saved, the F word wasn't a part of my local conversation. It totally vanished. Unfortunately, in the years since then, it has returned. That's not to God's glory, that's to my shame. And I remember exactly when it returned. I was, 6 months after I was saved, and I was hanging gutters for a company. And we did it by way of spikes. They didn't have good tools, and I was just using a claw hammer sideways, and missed a swing and ended up knocking a chunk of my thumb off, and that hurt a lot. And yeah, the old nature came up and roaring out in all of its filthy glory. And ever since then, it's been a struggle. So anyways, that is my testimony. I know that went on a long time, but that's literally the abridged short version. I suppose there's a shorter version. God found me, God called me, God saved me, end of story. And that's like everybody's testimony who's ever been saved. But within that, there's a unique story from each person. And that is that's my story. And with that, I'm almost home. Going to enjoy the rest of this ride. And you be good.